All right, let's start off by saying Barakatah Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem, Rucha Kodash. Welcome to another live lesson. The name of this one pretty much is Your Enchantments Are Wearing Off. All right, let me know if you can still hear me. Yeah, by accident my foot hit the power strip, so Satan made me hit the power strip to turn it off. As soon as I introduced the name of the lesson, which the name of the lesson is Your Enchantments Are Wearing Off, the water. And pretty much this is something that I was working on earlier, before camp, but ended up, time ended up escaping me, and I ended up having to go to camp, and I wasn't able to do the lesson earlier, but here we are now. It's called Your Enchantments Are Wearing Off, and pretty much I was watching, I'm trying to remember what video I was watching. I believe it was the priest Ayasha Muff from the Mississippi camp. I don't really remember offhand right now, but pretty much, the sentiment around the world is pretty much that, these nations around the world are getting tired of Babylon the Great, which is America. At one time they were enthralled with her, but now they're at the point now where they're seeing that dealing with this demon, that it's not going too well for them. Boy, I tell you, Satan, boy, he's. Anyways, so they're not falling for the okie doke anymore, So these nations, they're getting tired of America's BS. Matter of fact, let's start off with one quick one, and then I want to read some stuff to you. Some questions I was asking, Google earlier. I just want to touch on that. Jeremiah 51:7. Babylon has been a golden cup in the Lord's hand. So the Most High Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, is the one that's been controlling. It's been at the helm of America the whole time, and the world. No matter, what direction they were going in. If it doesn't go along with the plans of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, it's not going to work. It said they made all the earth drunken. And how did they make the earth drunken? By the wickedness of America. By what the scriptures call, well, not the scriptures, but what is called Americanization. All right, so we're going to read about that, but before before we go into it, let me go back here. Babylon has been a golden cup in the Lord's hand that made all the earth drunken. The nations have drunken of her wine, therefore the nations are mad. And the wine is a representation of their economy, monetary system, but also the way, the democracy and the way the American, mindset is. This is why you have the younger generation out there in Iran that, fought, protested against the Iranian regime that women should not have to wear, the hijab, I think it's called. I'm not sure the exact name of it. The hijab or hijab or something like that. That the veil that goes over the woman's face, and that's really biblical. Really, if you think about it, it's really biblical because a woman's supposed to be covered up. Because what that does, it avoids adultery. Other men looking at at this woman. She may be married, or she may be promised to someone, but through the American BS, and a lot of times those protests be started by those small hats. Truth be told, when you look at the helm of it, the individuals that steering that would be the small hats, because they're the ones pushing that. They'll send women in there that'll sort of kind of look like those people, and then they'll be the one that starts shit up. They'll be the shit starter, to get the movement going, because they have plans, because they're hoping that these people get so tired of their government that they'll overthrow the government themselves and do the work for America. But it's not going to happen. It says Babylon is suddenly fallen and destroyed. How for take bomb? I'm sorry. It says the nations have drunken of her wine, therefore the nations are mad. And the nations are at the point now where they're pissed off. They're mad because of the direction that their country is going in, the direction their economy is going in, the direction that everything that's happening within their country, the way that everything is going. So they're seeing that doing business with America is not what they thought it was, because they bought the lie, because they got caught up in the snare of America's enchantments. All right. So what I did was I typed in, what does it mean when something wears off? Because the name of the lesson is your enchantments are wearing off. So it says wear off means to gradually decrease, disappear, or lose effectiveness over time. See? It says it is commonly used to describe the fading effects of medication, sensations like pain of numbness, or emotions and feelings like excitement or novelty. So feeling/novelty, the initial excitement for the new job began to wear off. So pretty much your enchantments that you pretty much have, pushed upon the world are slowly but surely fading. Like the synonyms: fade, subside, diminish, weaken, and taper off. So my next question was, is the Americanization of America around the world wearing off? AI overview. Evidence suggests that the Americanization of the world is waning, and the word waning means to decrease, driven by a decline in the global dominance of the decline, right? These are some of the main drivers, driven by the decline in the global dominance of U.S. So that global dominance that they once had, in the clutch, is no longer working for them like it used to. It says pop culture, economic shifts, and a reduced perception of the U.S. as a positive global influence. And this is one of the major ones, because America has touted itself to be what's the word I'm looking for? An example of the righteous or positive global influence. And that's the picture that they painted to the world. We just want everything to be perfect. We want people to, get a fair share. We're the leaders of the free world, and we're trying to bring in this new world that everyone, gets treated equal, so that you don't have to suffer underneath, tyrants, so on and so forth, this, that, and the other. But when you start to look at the actions of America, they don't mirror what America's doing, you know, and this is why the American empire is losing that enchantment that it once had. It's losing that global influence. It says the U.S. shares the global box office. The U.S. share of the global box office has dropped significantly. The international audiences are increasingly turning to local, non-American content. So pretty much on all levels, America's falling. Key aspects of the declining influence: cultural shift. The appeal of American culture is decreasing, with over half of top Spotify artists now hailing from non-English speaking countries. Economic and political decline. The U.S. is increasingly viewed as an empire in decline. And 2026 just happened to be the 250th year of America. America as an empire. And in most cases, empires only last about 250 years. Although when you try to, research that, they'll say that that's not the case. It's not true. This, that, and the other. Because right now you have a lot of fact checkers that's working for the small hats, and they're giving the answers that they want to be put out there. They're erasing a lot of stuff, scrubbing a lot of stuff off of the internet, but you still have people that remember the truth, and this is why, if you came into this thing recently, within the last 3, 4, 5 years, and even sooner than that, or closer, like a year or 6 months or whatever, consider yourself very, blessed by Yahweh Bashem Shai, that the Lord allowed you to navigate through all of these different deceptions and all these different pitfalls that these devils got out here. Because remember, the scriptures say, if our gospel be hid, it is hid to them that are lost, and whom the God of this world has blinded the minds of them which believe not. It says, with a growing de-Americanization process, particularly regarding its social and health systems, reduced positive reputation. The proportion of people viewing the U.S. as a positive influence has dropped across numerous countries, with China gaining ground in perception. And why? Because they're looking at back in the days, America was doing a lot of underhanded shit, but it wasn't caught on camera, so to speak. It wasn't, talked about, on a broad scale, because the communication, around the world was not as quick as it is now. Now you could have something happen like that, like the Elder Pastor mentioned about the video, because I saw the video with the Marine that they broke his arm. That thing is global. That thing went viral within a couple of hours, and people are seeing that, and they're like, well, damn, if they treat their own servicemen like that, then what are they gonna do to us that are not even so-called them so-called that are in those different countries? You see, global shift in power. Other nations are developing stronger internal cultures and economies, reducing their reliance on the U.S. And this is why America is, puffing their chest and bringing their military into these different regions, because they're trying to reestablish that global influence that they once had, that global power that they once had. But you don't understand, what goes up must come down. You've had your run, you've had your fair share, you've had your time to rule, and now it's time for you, you're in your waning years, the waning years of the Babylonian Empire, the neo-Babylonian Empire. Ecclesiastes 3:1, to everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under the heaven. So there's a time and a chance to every purpose. A time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, and a time to pluck up that which was planted. Like when you planting crops, Well, America was planted back in 1776 and even before that. And now in 2026, it's time for them to be uprooted, because we're in the end of the world. This is the harvest. The harvest is the end of the world. A time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up. So we're in a time of America's breakup or breaking down. The Lord is destructuring this place. The Lord is breaking it apart. And that's why we're in the time right now of war. So the time, verse 6, a time to get and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to cast away. So America is being casted away. a time to love and a time of hate, verse 8, a time of war and a time of peace. So we're in a time of war right now, and the Lord set up the prophets to do just that, to bring destruction, through their words, to America. So when the prophets speak the words of Yahweh Bashim Al Shai, the Lord, brings them to pass. This is Jeremiah chapter 1 and verse, just bear with me 1 second. Verse 10. See, I have this day set thee over the nations and over the kingdoms, to root out and to pull down and to destroy and to throw down, to build and to plant. So how did Jeremiah do this? By speaking the words or the prophecies of Yahweh Bashim Al Shai. He didn't physically do it, like as far as tearing these places down, but the words that he spoke, which are the words of Yahweh Bashim Al Shai, that's how these nations were broken down. And before any empire goes down, the Lord sends his prophets out to prophesy against it, of its wickedness. Jeremiah 28:8, the prophets that have been before me and before thee of old prophesied both against many countries and against great kingdoms, of war and of evil and of pestilence. And we're seeing these things happening, taking place, taking root on the earth. Why? Because it's time for this Edomite empire, the final heathen empire, Babylon the Great, America, to go down. All right, so going back here, despite this, the U.S. still holds significant sway as a major economic and military power, but the rapid, unchallenged spread of American culture and values, Americanization, appears to be experiencing a noticeable decline. Why? Because you are a kingdom in decline. So what I did was I looked up Americanization, which we've done many times, right? Americanization, it says, is the influence of the American culture and economy on other countries outside the United States, including their media, cuisine, business practices, popular culture, technology, and political techniques. Some observers have described Americanization as synonyms with progress and innovation. So this influence that America once had on the world is wearing off. It's not beautiful anymore. They once the glare got out of their eyes, they're starting to see, that this so-called, young woman is really an old woman, like in the movie The Shining. They thought she was a young woman, but really, when you wipe the fog, pretty much you finding out that it was an old, decrepit old woman, a wicked, decrepit old woman, and that's what's happening right now. And when you click through these pictures here, they actually show you McDonald's in China. They show you Turkey. They show you the land of Israel. They have a McDonald's there. I believe that was Israel, or was it Russia? One of the two. So you have this influence all around the world, but now it's starting to lose steam. And one thing about these nations, they don't allow, that GMO. In most cases, they don't allow that GMO shit. They'll have better quality food than this raggedy asshole. You have people that leave America, that are from America, they'll leave and they'll eat certain foods overseas. They'll eat pasta and bread and all that, and they'll feel good. They'll eat desserts, all kind of sweets, drink, and they'll feel good. And then when they come back, within a couple of days to a week, they feel like crap after they eat this crap. So pretty much these devils are slow killing us. The cinema of the United States has dominated most of the world's media. So, you get the idea. If you want to read more of this, you can. Let's see, definitions. Like many concepts in social sciences, the term has been called ambiguous. However, a rough consensus on its meaning exists. Harm G. Schroeder, who focused on the economic dimension of the process, defined it as an adapted transfer of values, behaviors, institutions, technologies, patterns of organizations, symbols, and norms from the United States to the economic life of other states. So pretty much it's a transfer. And how did they accomplish this? Through their technology, or not technology, through their enchantments. Salaki for that. Through their enchantments. There was a precept that just came to mind. They accomplished that through their enchantments. Damn, there was one precept that just came to mind. Value, behavior, institution, transfer. I can't think of it right now. Lord's will it'll come back. If not, then we'll move on. But you get the idea. It says Mel von Elteren defined this in a negative way as a process in which economic, technological, political, social, cultural, and or social psychological influences emanating from America or Americans impinge on values, norms, belief systems, mentalities, habits, rules, technologies, practices, institutions, and behaviors of non-Americans. See? So it impinges. Why? Because they pretty much leave their culture to become something that they're not. So there's been an enchantment on the world, and that enchantment now is wearing off because if people are really starting to really see what America is like. I think this may be the one that came to mind. I believe this is it. Isaiah 14 and 4. That thou shalt take up this proverb against the king of Babylon and say, how have the golden city ceased? How have the oppressors ceased? The golden city ceased, and that's what's happening. People are starting to see that America really is nothing more than a great oppressor. Nothing else but a great oppressor. Matter of fact, let's get that. And they're oppressing the world how? Militarily, financially, threatening them, if they don't comply with the mandates or the way that America wants them to comply, then they'll come in there and they'll cause havoc upon them. And it's really, indirectly done, not even indirectly, directly done by the small hats. Right? It says to press, drive, oppress, exact, and the word exact means to, demand payment from someone, especially even if they don't have it. So America, when they got the dominion through the Federal Reserve System and the U.S. dollar, they pretty much oppressed the people. And if you don't pay this, if you don't pay that, then we're going to hit you with these sanctions, we're going to hit you with these embargo, or whatever the case is. We're going to hit you with all different types of, taxes and make your life miserable. Exert demanding pressure. Driver, taskmaster, ruler, oppressor, tyrant. And America, Trump is the pure definition of a tyrant. Lord, exactor of tribute, see? So an exactor of tribute is someone that demands tribute. And that's what America wants. That's why when you had, Saddam Hussein and Gaddafi, and different leaders around the world that wanted to get out of the dollar to trade for oil, what happened? America went in there and extracted them, and just drugged them through the mud. To be hard pressed, and that's what the world is. The world is hard pressed. So how has the oppressor ceased? And the word for cease is Shabbat, which means to rest. All right. So how has the oppressor ceased and the golden city ceased? And also the golden city here also represents the exactress of gold. I don't know if it's going to say it in any other. I don't think it. Now it doesn't really go into it here, but when you go to the word golden city, madaba, right? Boisterous, raging behavior, golden city, exactness of gold. And what does it mean by exactness of gold? The exactness or purity of gold, see, is going to tell you. It's going to tell you the exact. It's not going to give you what exactness means. But when you look up the word exact, it's going to tell you right and exact, and it's also going to tell you. Matter of fact, let me just see if this will come up. The quality of being accurate or correct. See, precision. But when you look up the word exact, it's going to tell you that, but it's also going to give you demand and obtain something, especially a payment from someone. And that's pretty much what you see there. So the golden city ceased the exactness of gold, and now we're coming to find out there was a video of, somebody took a video of all of the gold that these devils, here in America, of course, through the small hats, seized from Venezuela. They were showing you like crates full of gold and different gold, whether it was little pieces, or bigger pieces, whatever the case is. They just took all that shit. They just pretty much gangstered their way up in it, and they took all their shit. But the world is seeing this, because remember, a lot of this stuff is on social media. So they're seeing that. So the Americanization, your enchantment, is waning on the world, because at one time you had the world by the balls, so to speak. Revelation 13:3, and I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death. This goes back to the Roman Empire, and his deadly wound was healed. When was his deadly wound healed? Because they went down as an empire. Well, they went down as an empire, or Edomite, should I say, in 96 AD. But Jake, that took over through Nerva and the following emperors, they still followed the ancient pagan Roman ways. And then around 325 AD, that's when Christianity started to really be introduced more tolerable to the empire. So that's why around that time, that's why they call it the Holy Roman Empire. All right. So 1,000 years in the future would be what? The Renaissance, and that's how their deadly wound was healed, through the Renaissance. And then what happened when they were released from that prison sentence, so to speak? They went around the world to deceive the whole world. And what happened? The whole world became enchanted. And it says, and all the world wondered after the beast. So they were fawning, just like when the Apostle John looked at America, or this woman, he was like in admiration, like, wow, because that's how America is painted to the world. But now the people are starting to see that this nice, good-looking woman is nothing but a scumbag. Nothing but a real demon, an evil witch. Because their fangs are starting to come out. And they're starting to see it now. That's just a facade. It's just fake. It's not real. It says, and I saw, I was going to look up the word wondered. I believe it's thaumazo. Yep, thaumazo. Admiration. To wonder at, marvel. To be wondered at, to be had in admiration. What does it mean to wonder at something? Let me see. What does, it's going to probably give me two definitions, mean to wonder at something. To wonder at sometimes means to feel a deep sense of surprise, amazement, admiration, right? Or awe regarding something extraordinary, beautiful, or unexpected. So America was painted to the world as this beautiful golden city, this beautiful woman, this benevolent, dutiful wife, a dutiful woman that was pious, and good-hearted. But they're starting to find out that that's not the case. It is a combination of intellectual curiosity and emotional awe, and that's what it is. So America painted itself that way to the world. That's why the nations, got taken by that wine. And what's going on now? They were taken by the wine. Now that wine is starting to wear off, and they're starting to figure out. They're starting to get that hangover, and they're starting to figure out that wine was bad wine. And they're not liking the hangover effects from that wine that at one time they thought was this fine, top of the line type stuff. Often described as marveling at something that is difficult to understand or deeply impressive. And that's what America painted itself as, deeply impressive. And that's why you have that song by the Who, Guess Who? No, the Guess Who. I believe it's the Guess Who or the Who. Who? Let me see. Let me just type in Who, because there's two of them. There's the Who and then the Guess Who. American Woman. Woman lyrics. Is it? Let me see if it's American Woman song by the Guess Who's. Yeah, so it's the Guess Who. Let me see. Don't come a hanging around my door. I don't want to see your face no more. I got more important things to do than spend my time growing old with you. Now, woman, I said stay away, right? It says here, don't come a knocking around my door. Don't want to see your shadow no more. Colored lights can hypnotize, sparkle someone else's eyes. And that's what America is. You know, colored lights can hypnotize. And, you know, when you see places like Times Square, you know, and, you know, a lot of different places in New York, and you know, people are captivated by that, especially if they don't know any better. And this is what the Apostle John saw, you know, when he saw this woman. And that's why the angel got mad at him, because he got caught in that, you know, in that admiration. He was drawn to her, you know, because that's what America is. It's like a beautiful woman, you know, that brings about that lustful, alluring type spirit. No, now, woman, I said, get away. See, you know, so the people now of the world are starting to say this part. Now, woman, get away. American woman, listen what I say. You know. It says, don't come and hanging around my door. Don't want to see your face no more. I don't need your war machines. I don't need your ghetto scenes. See. So when they asked this guy if, you know, he wrote this about America, he said no. It was just something that happened. He just came to him. No, because when you look at the lyrics, or, you know, when you read these lyrics, you know, this could only apply to America. Color lights can hypnotize, sparkle someone else's eyes. You know, I don't need your war machines. I don't need your ghetto scenes. You know, the America is the one that's really known for its war machines and ghetto scenes, especially even back then. Nations, you know, had their, you know, they had their, you know, their you know, run down areas and all that. They have their war machines, but not like America. Even to this day, they boasting that they have the greatest military on the planet. See? So that's, you know, what they did. They enchanted the world. So when we go to Revelation 17:1, and there came one of the seven angels which had the seven vials, and talked with me, saying unto me, come hither, I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters, which is America, with whom the kings, which is also known as Babylon the Great, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, right? Because the kings of the earth, or the leaders of these nations, are in bed with America. They're the ones that's partaking in their financial/political systems, you know, the lowering their values and their religion so that they can get a piece of the pie. You know, and this is why you have, you know, puppet leaders around the world that's pretty much, you know, kowtowing down to America, because they know that they got dirt on them. You know? And subsequently, the Meptidistine island, right? You know, you have, if you look at it, is a certain shape, right? Just like the Nickelodeon, you know, logo. You know? Run tell that. With whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication, right? Because the kings of the earth have pushed this, you know, debaucherous way upon their citizens. You know, among the people that they rule over, and the whole world is caught up in this web. All right. So Isaiah 47:7 says, "And thou saidest, I shall be a lady forever." So America thinks they're going to continue to rule forever. You know, If they don't, select it for a minute, if they don't comply, we're going to, do this, that, and the other. All right. Well, we're going to see how that's going to work out for you. Okay. So it goes on to say, so that thou didst not lay these things to thy heart, neither didst remember the latter end of it. Yeah. Because it ain't like you don't know. You were told. And you never thought that you would have to pay for all the wickedness that you've done. To this day, that they're not sorrowful or shameful, or penitent for all the wickedness that they've done. If it was up to them, they'll just keep going. It says, therefore hear now this, thou that art given to pleasures, that dwellest carelessly, that sayest in thy heart, I am, and none else beside me. I shall not sit as a widow, neither shall I know the loss of children. But these two things shall come to thee in a moment, in one day, right? Because it's going to be suddenly. The loss of children and widowhood, because you're going to be taken out. They shall come upon thee in their perfection, for the multitude of thy what? Sorceries. So because of your enchantments, your sorceries, your deceptions, that's what's going to come upon you. The word is kashap, sorcery, witchcraft, magic, maga, and when you look up the word sorceries in the New Testament in Revelation 18, it goes into the Greek word pharmakia, which means your drugs. So it says, and for the great abundance of thine enchantments. All right? Enchantments, the word is chabar. Association, company, band, shared association, society, a magician, charmer, spell. So this can be, chabar could be, a companion, but it also means a magician, charmer, a spell. And what is a spell? Something you cast over somebody. All right? So it's either it could be a companion, or it could be a magician, a charmer, or someone that casts spells. All right? Enchantment. Meaning. Enchantment, a feeling of great pleasure, delight, just like we read about what? Being wondered at. The state of being under a spell, magic, see? So they're under a spell, under a magic spell, but that magic spell is starting to wear off now. And that's why your enchantments are wearing off. The people of the world are not buying your BS anymore. They're done making deals with you. That's why Iran said, "Now to hell with you." Every time America said, "Let's do this. Let's have a meeting or whatever the case is to figure this out." You dropping bombs on them. You tearing their ass up. Now they're like, "Nah, the hell with it." It's war. Yo. Inside joke. All right. So kabar. So that's going back to the word enchantment, right? It says, "For thou hast trusted in thy wickedness," and the scriptures say that the knowledge of wickedness is not wisdom. Thou hast said, none seeth me, because you don't think the Lord can see you. You don't think the Lord's eyes are 10,000 times brighter than the sun. You don't think that the angels are all around. Thy wisdom and thy knowledge, it hath perverted thee. Yeah. I believe this goes hand in hand with Ezekiel 28 chapter. It says something similar. And thou hast said in thine heart, I am, and none else beside me. Yeah, you think that the American influence and empire will never go anywhere. So now all you have to rely on pretty much is brute force, your military. But even that's not working for you the way it was at one time. It says, therefore shall evil come upon thee, thou shalt not know from whence it riseth, and mischief shall fall upon thee, thou shalt not be able to put it off, and desolation shall come upon thee suddenly, which thou shalt not know. See? So these things are going to come down upon you, and there's going to be nothing that you could do to get out of it. You ain't going to be able to figure out how to get out of it. You're not going to be able to cast any spells. You're not going to be able to have any counsels from your politicians or your military men or whatever the case may be. Because you're at the end of your road. Babylon is at the end of the road. Stand now with thine enchantment. So, the same way that you had the world enchanted, stand up with that now. And with the multitude of thy sorceries, wherein thou hast labored from what? From thy youth. Because unbeknownst to a lot of people, from the inception of America, they've been set up under witchcraft, under masonry. And they'll say, no, you had some of the presidents that were Masons. Some of them weren't. Look, the founders, they were Masons, one way or the other. They were all witches. They were all down with this. They all took the bag. What's his name? Haim Solomon came over here and paid all of them off. You see? And all that crap you see about, all these different wars, that was funded on both sides. All wars are bankers' wars, as Michael Rivero stated. If so be thou shalt be able to profit, if so be thou mayest prevail. So you're not going to be able to prevail. Because, the one thing that you relied on, which was your enchantments and your sorceries, your spells, your incantations, they're all wearing off. And people are seeing right through that cheap veneer. Thou art wearied in the multitude of thy counsels, right? Because you're trying to figure out how to get this thing, back to where it was. You're trying to figure out how to recast that spell on the world so that they can get back in that, in that fawning, that fawning and swooning spirit, the Lord you and bow down to you. But you're at your end. Your days have been numbered. You've been waiting to balance and have been found wanting. And your kingdom is taken from you and given to Yahushai. It's just a matter of time before he comes back. Just waiting out for these last couple of prophecies to play out so that Yahushai can come back and set everything back in the proper order. Let now the astrologers, the stargazers, the monthly prognosticators stand up and save thee from these things that shall come upon thee. Let them try to come up with a solution. They ain't going to be able to. Behold, they shall be as stubble. The fire shall burn them, because they're going to go up in smoke with you. Up in smoke, up in smoke. Inside joke. It says, they shall not deliver themselves from the power of the flame. See? So it's nothing that you do. There's no stimulus package. There's no counsel that you can hold. There's no enchantment. There's no spell that you can cast. There's no missile big enough, strong enough, powerful enough. No dome big enough or powerful enough to stop Yahushua from coming back and taking your ass out. There shall not be a cold to warm at, nor fire to sit before, right? Because America is going to be totally annihilated. It's going to be taken off the face of the earth. There will be nothing here. It'll be, everything that you see from east to west, from north to south, all these mountain ranges and all that, it's going to be a flat land. It's going to be a plain, a flat land. And nothing will ever, there will not be nothing here except for desert creatures, which the scriptures call devils also. Thus shall they be unto thee with whom thou hast labored. Right. Even these different nations that are here on the shores of America, they're going to go up in smoke. Even thy merchants from thy youth. And a lot of these, individuals that were here or that are here are making hot tracks out of here, because they're noticing that it's more cost effective for them to do business in their country and just ship it here than it is to have a business here. Because at the end of the day, when this place was established, it was set up to pretty much put the world in a financial bind, so that they can, bow down to the will of the international bankers that want everyone microseer, which is the MOTB. You see? It says, they shall wander everyone to his quarter, none shall save thee. So there's going to be nothing nobody's going to save you. You know? Nothing could save you. You know, because this is the season for catching the vapors. So with that, I pray that you brothers and few sisters have been edified. Till the next time I say, Shalom.